And welcome back, everyone, to another edition of Going for Two, presented by our friends at Home Field Apparel. I am your host. I'm the publisher of the Extra Points newsletter, Matt Brown. I am joined here by my colleague, Bryan Fischer, my co-host here on a beautiful Tuesday afternoon near the end of December. How you holding up, Bryan?
I'm holding up probably better than some of your compatriots there in the country of your homeland in Brazil. But
I don't want to talk about it. Soccer is done. So now we're starting the show and I'm already all angry.
You know what? I just had to. I mean, it was right there. I just saw the press release in terms of the numbers of people that were watching. I think It peaked around 33 million just in terms of the English language here on Fox. In this country, It was a great moment for soccer in America. We got Euros coming up right around the corner in like 18 months. We got the World Cup in a couple of years. So you know what? I'm excited. Just the emotion of that game, just how fun it was. I know it was just. I know you were excited just to see Messi.
Yeah, and definitely excited to celebrate in the glories of Argentina. Absolutely. No, look,
were you full on like Les Blues? You having like the beret on? Did you have like some wine and cheese out?
No, yeah, big wine guy, right here. I mean, it's hard for me to root for France too because my formative French soccer memory is the '98 World Cup, where lest you forget, they poisoned my cousins. Ahead of the game in order to beat them in the final. I generally don't root for the European team, and normally I would be happy to root for anybody else. But of course, for those unfamiliar, Argentina is to Brazil what Michigan is to Ohio State. Not to put too fine a point, that just goes to show like why my last month and a half has been hell, because it wasn't enough for my team, a favored squad, to lose in heartbreaking fashion to a country the size of Indiana, the size of Connecticut. Croatia is not that big of a country. I'm not talking like landmass, talking like population here. And then, of course, to watch your hated rival win in one of the most dramatic, most exciting finals ever. And now that their player is now going to be seen as the greatest of all time.
Well, you know what? We can compound it too. In a couple of weeks, if Michigan and Ohio State win their semifinal games, they can make it to LA. And you know what? Imagine the lead up to that one, and especially.
No, I don't. Here's the thing: I don't want to. My liver, my kidneys cannot handle it. If Ohio State and Michigan end up in the national championship game, we are going to temporarily suspend the rules of Mormonism in terms of like what I'm allowed to do to calm myself. Like the parallels between the two events are significant, not ideal. I will say, look, we got the Women's World Cup in 2023. The Americans,
thrilled about that one. About that one, not just because it is a great spotlight on the women's soccer game and really the growth that has undergone. I would say just in the last probably 2 years. I think it's exploded in popularity across Europe. Certainly here in the States, you're talking about NWSL expansion franchises coming out for multiple millions of dollars compared to when they were going for probably six figures not too long ago. And then it's in one of my favorite spots in really the entire globe in Australia and New Zealand. So I'm excited for that one for sure.
Yeah, and this will be a chance for America to get their revenge on the Netherlands, in a game that they're much more likely to win. So we're focused on that. We're on to Cincinnati. We're moving on from. I'm sure. Listen, it was a great World Cup. I mean, on the field, off the field,
we can devote an entire episode. Yeah.
Well, that's a different show. Happy for all of the degenerates who root for Europe's South American team in Argentina. Well, I'm working on a couple of things here as we wrap up the year. Hopefully everybody gets a chance here to spend some quality time with your family and loved ones, get a chance to catch your breath away from work and school as we kind of end the year here. It's a weird part of the college football calendar because while the rest of American society is kind of winding down, for whatever reason, this is one of the busiest weeks of the entire year because it's not just maybe bowl prep and it's not just coaching changeover for lots of places. I've forgotten this like the last 2 years. When you're listening to this, Wednesday's National Signing Day, or the first early National Signing Day, which is when 70% of the good college good recruits are going to commit. It's a different day It's a very different experience than maybe the big national signing day was when we only had one in February, when that was kind of Crootin. It existed in its own independent news cycle. It would be on TV. That was a bigger deal. Now it gets drowned out a little bit with actual football games, and also with the transfer portal, where you have a bunch of roster attrition and roster changeover that's completely independent of what's happening here on National Signing Day. What are some of the big storylines, Brian, that you are monitoring, given that what we are expecting is, hey, Georgia, Alabama, and Clemson are likely to have big days like they typically do. Texas is going to have a big day. It's mostly the same schools that have been here over the last couple of years, with maybe one or two exceptions. What are you watching? What's the story here to you?
I would be remiss if I didn't get a little nostalgic there for that February date and just how important it was, especially coming up as an early recruiting writer back in those days. I mean, it was, just the amount of energy that you got just from that one impact day. It was kind of off to itself. There was the Super Bowl certainly kind of going on in the background, or you're in the lead up to that, depending on when that ultimately that Wednesday kind of fell. But it was, just the interest level was so massive compared to right now, and I do feel like it gets lost in that calendar shuffle, and that's a bummer. I think for a lot of the kids, especially that this is their moment. This is their opportunity to say not only are they going to school, but really kind of cap off a terrific high school career, and change some fortunes of some programs, at least in their eyes and the eyes of many coaches. But it is a unique, I think, National Signing Day. I think the portal's impact, and you kind of alluded to it there, is not anything to be discounted. I think we kind of already see it. You had Dante Moore flip from Oregon to UCLA once you understood that Bo Nix was coming back, and I think there was kind of some interest in terms of that. And then you had other guys, you saw Devin Leary commit to Kentucky. So like maybe they end up losing a quarterback recruit. So like there's a whole lot of like the portal's impact on this signing day. And I think when you talk with coaches too, they're signing fewer high school program kids, that filters on down to whether maybe group of 5 people, they might be losing some guys, but they're getting those extra scholarships back, maybe signing some bigger high school recruiting classes than they would normally be used to because of that filters on down to the FCS ranks. They're going to get better talent, I think, out of the high school ranks between the COVID year, between what's happening with the transfer portal. I think the talent is going to kind of filter down the football pyramid, if you will, to kind of borrow a soccer term there. And that's going to be very interesting to kind of track, especially as we kind of get out of this really interesting roster management time, because you talk with coaches or people in ops and administrators that are dealing with some of this, like that COVID crunch. You really kind of cramped some folks' style, just in terms of like, all right, well, I know I got this amount of scholarships, and I can't go above this cap, and then how am I managing this guy when he transfers? Like it's been a bit difficult past couple of years when you factor in that extra year for the COVID, and I think we're still kind of on the tail end of that, and so that's impacting the high school ranks that we'll see on Wednesday. Still, those 5 stars are going to sign, and there's a lot of stories. We just saw Alabama flip a 5-star offensive tackle from Iowa. Those type of stories are always going to pop up, but I think the portal's impact on the actual National Signing Day and the recruiting in the high school ranks is going to be much more of a long-term storyline to look forward to, going beyond just this Wednesday.
I mean, you're clearly right. I want to say Yahoo had a pretty insightful story about this earlier in the week, talking that really showed how the combination of COVID roster crunch that's still working its way through the system here, and the significantly increased importance of portal recruiting versus high school recruiting has led some really good high school players to be in a lurch. And a guy that would have been a very strong G5 player might be an FCS guy, not because he's any worse, but because there's simply not spots. And I've actually talked to Division II coaches that have pointed this out. Like, hey, since COVID, the physical measurables of guys that we are in on now, pretty different than what it was in 2017, 2018, especially if you're maybe in a less recruited area. A couple of other trends here, or I don't know if the trend is exactly the right word, but things I've kind of picked up on in the beginning of the National Signing Day period is that the Big Ten schools, by and large, are not recruiting at nearly as strong of a clip as you might expect relative to their success and brands compared to some other programs that are out there right now. depending on how things go on Wednesday, I'm expecting at least one blue chip flip. I think we're looking at probably only one Big Ten team that's going to be in the top 10 over the recruiting class here, and that's Ohio State, and they might finish 7th or 8th. That may change come February, right? Many of the schools here, like Alabama and Georgia and Miami, already have 25 players, committed, and we'll see who ends up signing on Wednesday or Thursday. And Ohio State's class is a little bit smaller here, but Michigan is straddling around 20, and not only that, they don't have a blue chip ratio class. Twice as many of their kids are 3 stars rather than 4 stars. Penn State is going to be outside of the top 10. It's one of their best classes, and then from there the gap is enormous. Part of that is because of coaching changes at Wisconsin and Nebraska. Part of that is Michigan State has struggled, and they've been a really portal focused program. So that they're not taking a very big class, but your strongest programs are almost universally in the Southeast, even in the Pac-10. USC is not going to sign a top 10 class, and just in part because at least not Wednesday, because it's a smaller group. So I think what this is going to end up requiring over the next couple of months, and potentially as we head into a 12 team playoff, is we might need to revisit the blue chip ratio theory and what that means. And if you're not familiar with that term, this is coined by my friend and former colleague Bud Elliott, now of 247, which stated that in order to win in a college football national title, you needed to recruit more 4- and 5-star players over a 4-year period than you do 3-star players. Like, you need to have a blue chip ratio above 50-50. And it's pretty rare for a school that doesn't do that to make the playoff at all. TCU, a rare exception to this. Washington, Michigan State did it. And those teams don't win playoff games. TCU might be the best chance ever in the playoff era, outside of the Oregon team that made the national championship game of doing it. And those teams tend to have experienced elite quarterback play and, nailing roster decisions elsewhere. In a world where you can now kind of turn over your roster 15-20%, and you're not looking to sign all of your best players out of high school, I can see a world where that changes a little bit, and maybe we need to shift to a talent composite rule or something else. So something to keep in mind here. Maybe it shouldn't be shocking that some teams that are competing at a very high level are not going to be the biggest national signing day winners.
Well, I mean, I think you're already starting to see the industry adapt, a little bit. You're starting to see transfer rankings and transfer class rankings. And I think the ultimate in terms of the blue chip ratio and that talent composite index that 247 on 3 rivals all kind of do, the nature of that is definitely being adjusted a little bit to kind of this new era. I mean, you mentioned Michigan earlier. You kind of go back to their class last year. Obviously, they lost some offensive linemen, up front from a Joe Moore award-winning group that made it to the playoff, that won the Big Ten. They didn't take necessarily a ton of high school guys, but they got guys out of the portal, like our old friend that came on the show, Olu Atimi, who ended up winning the Remington Award as the best center transfer from Virginia.
He's easily the best player that's ever done a going for 2 interview.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so you're kind of seeing coaches adjust to that and use the portal. Yes, you're probably going to get more of a shorter term thing, but you're also getting a more experienced player. You're also getting somebody that you can count on a little bit more, that you can just kind of throw into the fire. And frankly, you talk with coaches, they like recruiting those transfers a lot more, because it is kind of more of a business decision, if you will, in terms of that term. You're not spending, months and months and months getting to know them, getting to know their families. It's really kind of coming in. Here's how you can fit our offense. Here's how you can be successful. And then here's where, you can sign on the dotted line. And so, I think that has changed the nature of things. And as well as, you mentioned those Big Ten teams, momentum is huge. Ohio State I think had a pretty good class to kind of start off the 2023 group, but it's kind of been picked apart. They've gotten some foot still, in the running for 5 stars, like Mateo Uyunglele, who's DJ's younger brother. Some others that could get in the mix there for the Buckeyes, but
they're probably going to get 1 or 2 more 4 stars, but it's not the 2000 it's not what it was 2 or 3 years ago,
Right.
for sure.
Which is kind of where everybody's like just kind of throwing those little eyebrows up just a little bit. Given the slippage not only against the Wolverines and not winning the Big Ten the last couple of years, but like once that recruiting, that just kind of adds to Ryan Day's problems that he's kind of dealing with. Still a terrific high school recruiting class, all things considered, obviously tops in the Big Ten, but it's like relative to kind of expectations and relative to where Ohio State has been recruiting at the high school ranks, in the past, they haven't really necessarily brought in a ton of transfers compared to some of their other programs as well. So you kind of got to factor it all in. And, you mentioned USC and UCLA. I think they are purposely taking smaller high school classes. Both, Lincoln Riley and Chip Kelly have kind of made that a point in terms of, we're probably going to always sign, 15 or so guys instead of the 2025 that we normally would. And, the rest are going to be made up with impact transfers. And these are going to be guys that are playing the majority of their careers in the Big Ten. I think conference realignment is another kind of big storyline. I wrote a couple of them out there for Fox Sports going into tomorrow as well. That is something to kind of keep an eye on, how UTSA is doing, not relative to Conference USA, but the AAC, how FAU under a new head coach in Tom Herman is going to be doing, not compared to their old conference rivals, but their new ones. I think focusing a little bit on that, even Texas and Oklahoma, they might be the top 2 Big 12 classes, once again, and have some pretty good recruiting classes, but they're not Alabama, they're not Georgia, they're not those elite SEC programs that you're going to see consistently at the top 10 of those recruiting rankings.
There's one thing, independent of just who's recruiting really well, that I do want to talk about this. Speaking of transfers and business decisions, this is a part of the discourse that's been going around the past couple of days. I'm sure it's going to be a part of the conversation around National Signing Day, really into spring ball, and it is absolutely driving me crazy. I want to see if I can pull up the exact quote here that has really kind of set me off a little bit, right? So this you have probably heard, and this is accurate, that athletes are being induced to transfer because of collectives and NIL deals, even if they weren't necessarily hitting the portal or planning on hitting the portal. This is a thing. It's especially a thing in college basketball. It is a thing in college football here as well. And a lot of that conversation right now is centered around North Carolina quarterback Drake May. You've heard Mack Brown talk about this. The quote that really kind of set me off here was from Pitt head coach Pat Narduzzi. He was giving a radio interview on 937 The Fan. And he says, quote, that he heard 2 schools offered UNC quarterback Drake May $5 million to transfer. Would Pat Narduzzi say who? No, but he knows who. Says it's, quote, gotten out of control and it's only going to get worse. It is a sad, sad deal. Brian, I think this is bullshit. I think it's bullshit on a couple of different points. We'll start here at the high level here. I think the odds are that somebody reputable has legitimately offered a North Carolina's quarterback $5 million to transfer is not true. The school that I have heard the most in the whisper network around this is Ohio State, which I think would make even less sense because, one, they don't have a glaring roster need at quarterback, although everyone's going to be interested in a guy that might be a Heisman candidate. They have 2 5-star quarterbacks already on that roster. But also, their collective is struggling in fundraising right now. And to be able to, hey, we can't pay the people that we're trying to pay, but also we're going to throw $5 million at a position that is a luxury and not an immediate need, doesn't pass the sniff test. But also, high school players are more expensive in this market right now than transfer players are. It's different in basketball, but in football, people are overpaying for potential. They're overpaying to get up the rivals 247 list. They're overpaying for ego. And high school, I have not heard anybody getting $5 million as a high school player. The absolute top of the market is going to be maybe somewhere around 2. Whatever number you're hearing generally thrown out over the next couple of days, the real number is probably half of that, although there are real numbers. So I think this is a product of something we've discussed a lot with NIL and recruiting, where there's a whisper network of coaches and agents and message board people and boosters, and they all get reinforced. And whatever number gets added 20, 25% to it every time from reality. And there's no way to kind of verify it. So $5 million feels ridiculous. Even that aside, though, it is so easy, and people do this every year, for coaches to complain about either tampering allegations from other coaches or about how transactional the recruiting has been, and you're hearing about bags being thrown everywhere. And this is my plea to anybody who's talking to a coach. If they're not willing to bring out a receipt, if they're not willing to name names, name coaches, name schools, or provide documented proof to any of this, ignore it. Who freaking cares? If you are in a position, if you care this much about it, present some proof, throw some names, actually talk through it. Otherwise, you are then letting that reporter, be the sounding board to amplify message board bullshit. I think it's lousy journalism. I think it's empowering millionaire coaches to complain when they don't have the actual information needed to back any of this stuff up, and I'm tired of it. It is the most vapid, empty kind of complaining, especially from somebody like Narduzzi, and I don't have any more patience for it.
Well, you are not alone, my friend. I think, this is something that always comes out, around National Signing Day. I mean, how many times do you hear, oh, the five-star committed to XYZ rival? Of course they were paying him. Like those type of stories have always existed and happened in the background, especially on those fan sites, that you allude to. But like now it's coming out a little bit more into the open with NIL and with the coaches, and I don't doubt that there is tampering going on. I know there is, in terms of talking with high school coach and.
It is happening. And I try to interrupt. I'll also just say this. I don't think tampering is the right word to use. Tampering is what happens in the NBA when somebody is under contract right now and you try to get them to break that contract or force a trade somewhere or team up somewhere else. And the tampering is over the contract. These players are not under contract. It might be scummy. It might be anti-competitive. It might break some of commonly understood rules and regulations. I don't think it's tampering.
Sorry. No, I completely agree. I mean, this is not necessarily tampering. I think because of the contract situation that you're just speaking to, and this is more just the frustration that these college coaches are not adapting to the current reality of kind of the marketplace. This is that they have kind of created this monster for themselves. They wanted the early signing period that has created the pressure for a lot of these issues to pop up in a short amount of time frame. You are hearing so many things about NIL and all that. Yes, the NCAA has not been enforcing a lot of things, in terms of the actual mechanisms that they have at their disposal. Obviously, it's just, it's difficult to kind of prove a lot of these allegations. It really is just a coach hearing something from another coach, or, maybe it's a family member, a high school coach that ends up mentioning it in passing about something that they heard. So then that ends up getting further passed around. So it is a bummer that it kind of devolves into this. And frankly, if it were $5 million for Drake May, I feel like that's even underselling, his potential, especially for some of those powerhouse programs next year. I mean, Trevor Lawrence is getting like 9.5. I think if you average his contract out, the probably Heisman Trophy favorite for next year, probably pretty valuable.
Oh, I would short the hell out of that. Anybody betting on I'll say this right now. If you're putting real American dollars on Drake May winning the Heisman, what you are saying here is, I think North Carolina could contend for a college football playoff spot, or he's going to put up Hawaii run and shoot level numbers for a top 20 North Carolina team. I think he could throw for 6,000 yards. And if North Carolina is 7-5, he's not going to win the Heisman Trophy because the people who vote for it are a bunch of filthy casuals. So that's what you got to think about here. I would much rather bet on somebody on Georgia or Ohio State or Clemson than anybody in North Carolina.
Well, I mean, if Drake May was getting $5 million to go Ohio State or Georgia, in particular, who might have a quarterback opening, obviously next year, I think he could definitely win the Heisman Trophy and win a whole lot more than that, and be the difference maker when you're talking about this last edition of the college football playoff with 4 teams. So, I think the star quarterback and that realm of NIL and that kind of money, is definitely separate from, your backup left tackles, your defensive tackles. You might get out of the portal, you might get out of the high school ranks that is on the 4 or 5 star variety. The problem is just like, nobody knows what's going on, and really only a handful of collectives or that might be dealing with multiple players. Maybe a handful of lawyers might know. There's just no real sense of the market, and I think that is kind of where the frustration ultimately is. It's not necessarily even the tampering, because guess what? Everybody's doing it, whether it's the head coach, whether it's a coach on their staff. This whole thing has been going on for a long time, and you know what? You can say your frustrations, you can voice them, and go from there. But at the end of the day, this is something that is probably not going to be changing anytime soon. So get used to it. Like that is the biggest thing that I keep telling coach. You got to get used to this. You got to start being proactive. All right.
You make $6 million. This is what the money is for, right?
You are getting compensated for your frustration. I know it is tough to re-recruit your roster pretty much every single week. I totally understand that, especially when you're dealing with a football size roster versus say a basketball roster where you can provide a little bit more intimate care and one-to-one attention. That is not necessarily the case when you're dealing with probably close to 100 people just in terms of your program. You throw in the walk-ins and all that. Yes, there's only 85 scholarship guys, but at the end of the day, you know what? You're being well compensated in order to deal with some of these issues. And guess what? You know what? If you're the one getting the buyout, okay? It's not the players. It's typically not even your assistants in most cases. It's you. You're the one. If you end up failing, you end up not taking advantage of the market. Well, you know what? You're going to be okay for the rest of your life. The others probably not. So keep that in the back of your mind. I know it is a frustrating thing for a lot of head coaches, but guess what? That is where we're at here in 2022.
The reason I think why so many coaches are hesitant to name names or meaningfully try to use their influence to actually try to restrain some of this is because they know that their team is doing it too, or they don't want to completely nuke their ability to potentially take advantage of this here as well.
Well, I think it's a lot more of just, yes, there is the we're doing it too aspect, but this has always been kind of inherent to coaching. I mean, you look at how many times you look at, especially the NFL, just how of an incestuous industry it kind of is, I know so-and-so, he's going to be my offensive line coach. He's going to follow me around, like that sort of thing, really, it really is kind of a fraternity in that respect. You do kind of protect your own a little bit. And at the end of the day, they know that if they start turning in people are going to be turning them in themselves. So it's a bit of a mutually assured destruction, but it is annoying at least when they want to hide behind, I heard, somebody is telling me that, like, get out of here with that. Okay, we get that. We're hearing the same thing too, but actually proving it, actually having those allegations, believe me, working on some of the investigative stories like that, there's a high bar in order to publish some of those things. And if you're not going to say it, you might as well just keep quiet.
That's it. If somebody wants to put their political capital and put their chips in the table and say, I feel so strongly about this, I'm going to name a name and say this, I am hearing that so-and-so is doing great. We'll talk about it. Otherwise, shut the hell up. Like at least if you're a P5 person, right? If the coach at Incarnate Word wants to call me and express frustration and that person's making 30,000 and their coordinators are making under 100 and they're not poaching anybody else because you're Incarnate Word, I might roll my eyes a little bit, but that's a different situation than somebody making $5-6 million complaining because their job's gotten harder.
Well, I mean, the night before Narduzzi's comments, you had Jeff Traylor out there tweeting about the NCAA and championing charges with Group of Five, but obviously not naming any names or just saying, Group of Five, Power Five programs. We're doing it to his roster, and you know what? If it ends up working out for the kids, if they're getting better deals, more money in their pockets, a better situation to play, you know what? Who cares? At least that's for my perspective. If it's ultimately an industry about the kids and about their experience in colleges, we should actually be encouraging like this. Do what you want. This is a capitalistic society. If you want to go the socialist route, well, we might have to be working a little bit harder on those antitrust exemptions.
Yeah, that is a newsletter for another week. But to put a bow on this, like I think, and it sounds like we both think these kind of complaints are baloney. What isn't baloney are the savings and products you can get at Home Field Apparel, our title sponsor and our friends that outfit this podcast, outfit our friends and outfit this industry in the most comfortable, unique, officially licensed collegiate apparel you can buy on the internet. I'm wearing a Tulane shirt right now. Oh. It's got a pelican. It's surfing on a surfboard. We're both wearing Tulane stuff. How about that? Look at that. We're
big fans of the Green Wave, not only on this podcast with this stuff. I mean, they are rolling in recruiting, by the way.
Yeah, they're going. Listen, everything's coming up Tulane right now. We're big fans of the 504. I'm a big fan of being in the, of being a homer for all things Uptown. For all things of the boot. Yeah, we're happy for them. We're happy for the surfing pelican. But they got a bunch of stuff at home field that has nothing to do with surfing pelicans. They have other surfing animals like anteaters, if that's a little bit more your scene. They have animals that play golf. They have animals that are dunking basketballs across FCS, FBS, 1 AAA. I have talked to a couple of licensing directors at mid-major schools that anticipate joining the home field family in early 2023 as we get more into basketball season for schools that don't have football teams. So you should take advantage of all that because they're also extremely comfortable beyond being unique and interesting and historic. They are some of the softest, most comfortable shirts and sweatpants. I'm wearing the Doggers right now too. Can't really see them, but I'm wearing them. That you can get. And you can save 15% off your first order whenever you buy something on homefieldapparel.com this holiday season by using promo code Extra Points. That is homefieldapparel.com. T-shirts, hoodies, crew necks, Doggers, stickers, the works. Your favorite vintage collegiate apparel designs. One other thing I think I wanted to maybe just talk about here a little bit that's not baloney. As we kind of wrap up here for the week. It's something that has nothing to do with National Signing Day, nothing to do with recruiting. As you know, Brian, and as listeners here and people that are part of our extended family know, one of the things that we've kind of hung our hat on writing a lot about has been video game development. I have tried to be as dogged as possible to really get to the bottom of what's happening with the development and release of EA Sports College Football. That will be coming out in 2024. And EA has, to the best of my knowledge, has an exclusive licensing agreement to produce simulation quality college football games. If somebody else is going to be licensed to, have the Stanford and the USC and the Ohio State logos and everything to be a simulation quality game, it's got to be EA's. But I've been playing another game the past couple of days here that you can play right now. You don't have to wait till 2024. If you want to scratch that itch, I wrote about it in the Extra Points here today, my last one here before taking a couple of days off. But Brian, have you heard at all about this Football Coach College Dynasty game? Did we get a chance?
I only heard about it because you were tweeting about some of the images, and so that's why. But before you got into this game, I had not.
No. So this came out relatively new. Relatively recently. It's on Steam if you're a PC person. It's not on Mac yet. But what I think is interesting about this is that it's not a game where you can like smash the circle button to spin around a linebacker and like execute the option perfectly. It's not really an action game. It's purely simulation. But if you're somebody that when you play EA Sports, when you're playing some of these other games, you're mostly focused on recruiting or roster management or some of like the spreadsheety stuff. That's all this game is. And you don't need 400 developers to figure out how to code the physics of collisions and shadows to make this kind of thing work. This game was made by one dude over a 7-month period. So it's not, I would say, not the most polished thing in the world. But if you want to play a game without the official licensing, I think I'm playing as Ohio. And I just recorded a big victory over Chicago, which I think is supposed to be Northwestern, but it's a Chicago team in purple and white. But if you get to sit there and you get to go through your playbook and you get to kind of figure out what the yards per play of running a particular play with your personnel might be, and you can build your recruiting strategy, and it has like a little system here where you might get more NIL money from boosters if your team does X, Y, or Z, and you have to manage this whole thing. It's really hard, but I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And I think what's exciting here is it kind of expands the possibility of what kinds of games you could do around college athletics besides just the gigantic AAA budget experience. This is the sort of thing, if I had more time and a little bit better JavaScript skills, I would want to build, right? I think we've joked about making an athletic director version of this at some point.
Yeah, we'll talk about that idea offline because I think that will require a little bit more development work than we have time for.
Time certainly, yeah.
But I mean, when you're kind of going through the game there, the first thing that kind of struck me was, at least to bring it back to the beginning of the podcast. Soccer. You have FIFA. I think that's probably one of the most, if not the most popular video game on the planet. It's one of. Certainly, and EA makes it, and that is about the game. Playing the game, playing as Messi, playing as Mbappe. That's what that is about. But there's Football Manager too, which I think a lot of people find is quite similar to the game that you just described, and has that element of transfers and managing rosters and that sort of thing, which I think almost is really special about college football is there are so many things to do kind of off the field. It's not just as much as we love the pageantry and what happens between the lines on Saturdays. There's a whole lot that goes into that, just that one day on the calendar. And this game kind of alludes to that, where you're doing a lot of that stuff. And I'm interested to maybe peel away 5 or 10 minutes to start exploring the game a little bit more, after your experience. But it does seem like there is also a market in the college football ecosystem to have something similar to kind of Football Manager for us sickos here at the NCAA level.
Do you play Football Manager much? I
not
gave it
anymore.
a spin.
Not anymore. I used to back in the day, and like they've made it almost too complicated to just kind of drop in and get things, because it does take a lot of time. And I now that I have 2 small children and obviously multiple jobs and doing this podcast and everything, like it is time to actually play video games. Period has dwindled to practically nothing. But I think it's one of those things that if you're interested in kind of the more of the mental side of the game and going through things, that you might learn things about, just the ecosystem itself, a lot more doing the video games. I mean, I think we've talked about it before. That's kind of one of the biggest missing things, about not having that in-state video game, is not learning the fight songs, not learning those stadiums. And I think this, at least a bit of a bridge to that.
Yeah, this is I completely agree on that front. And like, that's part of how what I've learned about hockey. I've learned mostly through playing video games rather than like going to events and like kind of building that fandom, that way here. I'm going to be interested in kind of fiddling around with this off season. And also, I think I'm going to, pop around with their Discord community and everything, because, the action games for football are so sophisticated that people right now, like players have used those to help with playbook install and to help understand how things work, how a play is supposed to go and how to read something and everything. I wonder, and this will depend on the quality of the simulation, but to what extent an individual's better understanding of off the field, whether that's not just roster management, but maybe even some of the stuff that you and I write and talk about, could come through video games. I think. Would you agree that Football Manager in some capacity has changed the sophistication of certain kinds of soccer fans now that they might have a little bit better understanding of club budgets and how to buy and sell players after they've been trying to do it themselves on the computer?
Oh, I think absolutely that has increased the understanding, at least behind some of the decisions. Maybe not necessarily the rational fan aspect of things, where you're like, well, you know what, we still need that striker so why aren't you paying the extra $20 million? Well, you might have some understanding in terms of why a club might not go to those levels to value a player like that, or bring in somebody. Obviously, you're talking about bringing academy kids in and selling them on for a profit because you're a selling club, and like understanding some of those dynamics. I think in the game of soccer, at least, that are inherent to that you do kind of get more of an in-depth understanding versus just kind of, reading a transfer report or reading some transfer rumors online, and at least kind of doing it yourself. I think does kind of build up that muscle memory in terms of that understanding, and like, all right, well, I get why they did this move a little bit more, and maybe from a college football perspective, certainly from a roster management perspective, I think this could lend to that, because it's something that even administrators and coaches are dealing with right now, and they're having trouble with it. So I think any increase in terms of allowing that fan to understand it as well is going to be helpful.
Yeah. So I wrote a little bit about this in the story. There's another college football game in development right now that appeals to a different kind of player. For somebody that's more into the ultimate team, card collecting mode. We'll see, if that gets developed or what that ends up looking like, but that's on the table there. There may potentially be other segments in this market to go after. Maybe that's non-college football sports. Maybe that's simulation for hockey or simulation for basketball. Maybe there's a path to trying to build other player licenses and try to make that more realistic without the schools. You'll no say. That is one of the many storylines that we will be following into 2023. It'll be fun. I'm excited to take a little bit of time away to kind of catch my breath a little bit here. And I think that will be true for many fans. Get a chance to watch some bad bowl games from teams that you maybe.
There is no such thing as a bad bowl game.
Okay. No, come on. Listen, we need to be adults about this. it is great that bowl games exist. I hope that everybody that participates has a positive experience. Do not look me in the eye and try to tell me that the Iowa Kentucky Music City Bowl is a good bowl game. It might be a sickos bowl game. It might have entertainment value independent of anything else. That's a bad game. Like we can be grown up so we can acknowledge that for what it is. Marshall UConn is cool for a bunch of reasons. I don't think we need to disparage the event itself. Is that a good football game? No. And it wasn't, and that's okay.
It was a different type of football game. You had UConn threatening to come back in that one. It was just fun. Okay. I like the entertainment aspect, and boy, do we get entertained just in unique ways come bowl season. And I think that's what everybody complains about there being too many of them, whatnot. It's number one, great opportunities as you mentioned for a lot of those programs, for a lot of those kids. Sometimes it's their final game. This does allow them to kind of go out, with a final flourish, especially for some of those schools that are about to experience some bomb cyclone coming their way this week. Maybe get some warmer climates down there.
I'm in that bomb cyclone. Legitimately nervous about how that's going to impact holiday travel.
Oh yeah. Well, I think it's going to impact some bowl games based on what I've been hearing is that already I know a couple of bowl directors are a little bit worried in terms of the attendance figures and how things are going to look. And, whether, some of their things that they've been trying to do about hospitality, about some of these midweek games, especially before the storm hits, during the storm hit, and even after. I mean, I'm even worried a little bit. I don't know if you saw some of the graphics, up in where Bronco Mendenhall, my HeadCoachU podcast partner is they're talking about like minus 50 back in the great state of Montana. Oh, that's I can't even imagine that. And and then we got some big ones. At least they will be inside in terms of those semifinals when we get to them next week. But it's going to be a fascinating kind of look at what's coming up here. But it's bowl season. We're going to see some interesting, unique things. We see it every single weekend in college football. That is what makes the sport special. And I think we're going to see it even more so, not only given the elements at play for some of these games, but everything going on. We're going to see something unique, and that is what makes a bowl season special.
You are going to see something unique. Dude, minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit I don't even think this is being hyperbolic. I think that's the temperature on the moon. Like not close.
I guess it was like a wind chill that I saw.
I'm saying. I'm not saying like at the dark side of the moon at night, because I know that's like negative 200, but I don't think that's crazy. Somebody who teaches 6th grade science, you can drop us a note at compliance@extrapointsmb.com. But that is space temperature. That's not fit for human life or animal life.
What's the forecast there for the Brown household in Chicago?
Let's pull this up here live. This is the most compelling podcasting there is. I'm just going to weather.com. Let's go check my.
Well, the only reason I ask is I was just talking with a couple of folks right before we jumped on our recording, and they're all talking about how great it will be to see each other, not only in person in LA for the national title game, but to experience that lovely weather. And I said I can definitely understand how the normal, it's probably 60 and sunny come that week in January, but it'll be a welcome relief for a lot of folks coming from around the country.
I'm pulling weather.com does not give the wind chill, but on Friday at my house, the high is scheduled to be 2 degrees.
Ooh.
And the low will be -4.
At least you have plenty of experience from those type of temperatures from your time to the trip from Montana. So,
man, I've lived in Chicago for a long time. I'm from the Midwest. I'm never going to get used to that stuff, man.
Well, even back in, I think they're saying like in Louisiana, you're talking about single digits. I know some of my family in Houston, they're kind of preparing for single digits down in Houston, which is not normal for any time of the year, much less.
No, worried about the
grid for sure.
Pipes, yeah.
Yes, so
anyway, stay safe, everyone. Stay warm. Don't take any travel risks here if you can avoid it. Christmas is not the time of year you want to be spending in the hospital, especially if your power grid might freeze. You should stay home. You should listen to podcasts. You should read newsletters, and you should go eat unhealthy things while you wait for Santa. We're going to have another episode at the next week that's going to dig in a little bit more into kind of recapping the year, digging into where things are going for two, where things are with extra points, where things are going as an industry. in 2023. And you can find some more of our Connect interviews, of course, on Collegiate Sports Connect, which is free. You can say nice things about us on Apple or Spotify or YouTube or Google Podcasts. And Extra Points will resume probably the 29th or the 30th as we head into what should be an exciting 2023. Everyone, have a happy and safe and meaningful holiday season. We appreciate your listenership and your readership. And we will get back in touch with you again very soon.